There was a time when Netflix didn't just dominate streaming, it was streaming. The red ink glowed on screens across the world like a digital throne. It wasn't just a logo, it was a promise that the future of entertainment had arrived, that Hollywood's old gatekeepers were finished, and that a new empire had risen from the ashes of Blockbuster. Netflix didn't just change the game, it rewrote the rules entirely. Think back to 2013. House of Cards drops not on a network, not in theaters, but all at once, straight into your living room. No commercials, no waiting. Kevin Spacey stares into the camera and whispers about power, and suddenly, everyone realizes this is different. This is revolutionary. Then came Orange is the New Black, then Stranger Things, then The Crown. Netflix wasn't making TV shows, it was crafting cultural moments. Water cooler conversations, memes, obsessions, the kind of buzz that money couldn't buy. Except Netflix was buying it. Big time. By 2018, Netflix had over 130 million subscribers. Its market value soared past $150 billion. Reed Hastings, the CEO, was hailed as a visionary, a disruptor, the man who killed cable and made Hollywood bow. But here's the thing about empires. Built to fast, they're built on cracks you can't see yet, because while the world watched Stranger Things and binged The Witcher, Netflix was quietly bleeding, constantly. Red N wasn't just their logo, it was becoming their balance sheet. Nobody saw the collapse coming. Not the investors, not the fans, not even the executives inside Netflix's glass towers in Los Gatos, California. They were too busy celebrating, too busy expanding, too busy believing their own myth. The myth that growth would never stop, that subscribers would keep flooding in forever, that Netflix was untouchable. But myths don't last, and thrones built on borrowed time eventually crumble. To understand Netflix's fall, you have to understand their obsession. It wasn't fame, it wasn't prestige, it was growth. Growth at all costs, growth above everything else. Growth like a drug they couldn't quit. In 2013, Netflix spent around $1 billion on content. By 2019, that number exploded to $15 billion. By 2022, over $17 billion. They were outspending Disney, outspending HBO, outspending everyone, because Netflix didn't own most of its library. Those classic shows you loved, Friends, The Office, Grey's Anatomy, they were just renting them. And as rival studios woke up and launched their own platforms, they took their shows back. So Netflix made a choice. If we can't rent the content, we'll create it ourselves. Sounds smart, right? It wasn't, because Netflix didn't just create content, they flooded the platform. Hundreds of originals, every genre, every language, every budget level. Some brilliant, some forgettable, many you never even heard of. They greenlit projects faster than they could measure success. They poured millions into shows that barely anyone watched. But it didn't matter, because the subscriber count kept climbing. Wall Street loved it. Every quarter, Netflix announced new subscriber milestones. The stock soared. Investors cheered. But inside the company, the cracks were widening. Netflix was spending more than it earned. Way more. They financed their empire on debt, billions in borrowed money. The plan was simple: keep growing, keep borrowing, and eventually, the profits would catch up. Except, what if they didn't? What if growth slowed? What if subscribers stopped coming? What if the math stopped working? Netflix had one answer: spend more, make more, push harder. It was a gamble, a bet that the future would justify the present. That momentum would carry them forever. But momentum, like gravity, has a limit. And in early 2022, Netflix hit the ground. April 19, 2022, Netflix announced its Q1 earnings, and the world stopped. For the first time in over a decade, Netflix lost subscribers. Not fewer than expected, not slower growth, actual loss. 200,000 subscribers. It sounds small, but to Wall Street, it was apocalyptic. The stock collapsed. In one day, Netflix lost $50 billion in market value, vanished like smoke. Investors panicked, analysts scrambled, headlines screamed, "Is Netflix dying?" The end of an era, streaming giant in freefall. Inside Netflix, it felt like a funeral. Employees were stunned. Executives held emergency meetings. Reed Hastings, the calm, calculated CEO, tried to reassure everyone, "This is temporary. We'll bounce back." But nobody believed him, because this wasn't just about one bad quarter. It was about the myth shattering, the myth that Netflix was invincible, that growth was infinite, that the throne was unshakable. For years, Netflix had operated on faith that subscribers would always come, that content would always hook them, that the flywheel would keep spinning. But the flywheel stopped, and suddenly, every decision Netflix made looked different. All those billions spent on content, now it looked reckless. All those risky shows, now they looked wasteful. All that confidence, now it looked like arrogance. The market didn't just punish Netflix for losing subscribers. It punished them for breaking the promise that Netflix was the future, the promise that streaming was unstoppable, But here's the brutal truth. Netflix wasn't losing because they made bad content. They were losing because the world had changed. COVID was over. People were going outside again. Competitors were everywhere: Disney+, HBO Max, Apple TV+, Prime Video. Even YouTube and TikTok were stealing hours of attention and Netflix was still playing by 2018 rules in a 2020 game. They had no ads, no cheaper plans, no flexibility. Just one model: pay us, binge our shows, stay subscribed. But audiences were tired of price hikes, tired of password crackdowns, tired of shows getting canceled after one season. The love affair was over, and Netflix, for the first time in its history, didn't know what to do. Desperation makes you do strange things. For Netflix, it meant abandoning everything they once stood for. Remember when Netflix said they'd never have ads? That ads were the enemy of the binge experience? That Netflix was premium, pure, uninterrupted entertainment. Yeah, that lasted until it didn't. In November 2022, Netflix launched an ad-supported tier. Cheaper subscription, commercials included. The thing they swore they'd never do. But it gets worse. Netflix also announced they were cracking down on password sharing. Millions of households had been sharing accounts for years. Netflix knew and didn't care. It was part of the charm, part of the brand. Now they needed every dollar. They started charging extra for shared accounts, forcing users to pay up or get kicked off. It worked, sort of. Subscribers trickled back, revenue nudged up, but the magic was gone. Netflix also pivoted to gaming. Yes, gaming. They launched mobile games tied to their shows, hoping to create a Netflix ecosystem. Hardly anyone played them. They tried live events, a Chris Rock comedy special, a reunion show, anything to spark buzz, anything to feel relevant again. But none of it felt like Netflix. It felt like flailing, and through it all, the content spending continued. $12 billion in 2022, $17 billion in 2023. Movies nobody watched, shows nobody talked about, big budgets, weak results. Because here's the problem. Netflix had trained audiences to expect everything, but they were delivering anything: quantity over quality, volume over vision, data over daring. Meanwhile, Disney Plus had everything: Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, Disney classics. HBO Max had prestige: The Last of Us, House of the Dragon, Succession. Even Apple TV Plus was making waves with Ted Lasso and Severance. Netflix had a lot. But what did they have that mattered? The answer was getting harder to find. The $12 billion wasn't just a budget. It was a gamble, a desperate, expensive bet that spending more would fix everything. But you can't buy loyalty. You can't buy culture. You can't buy the throne back. And Netflix was learning that the hard way. When a king stumbles, the wolves come running. And for Netflix, the wolves were everywhere. Disney Plus launched in late 2019 and hit 100 million subscribers in 16 months. It took Netflix a decade to reach that. Why? Because Disney didn't need to create a brand. They already had one. They had Mickey Mouse. They had Marvel. They had Star Wars. Families flocked to Disney Plus like it was a reunion with childhood. HBO Max. They played the prestige card. Game of Thrones fans. The Sopranos loyalists. The kind of viewers who wanted quality, not quantity. Apple TV Plus. They spent big on talent. Big names. Big budgets. The Morning Show. Ted Lasso. Severance. They didn't have a massive library, but what they had mattered. Even Amazon Prime Video, which nobody thought of as a real competitor, was quietly winning. Why? Because it was free with Prime. Nobody signed up for Prime Video. They just had it. And then there were the dark horses: YouTube, TikTok. Even piracy. YouTube was the ultimate competitor Netflix ignored. Free, endless, engaging. Creators were building empires while Netflix was canceling shows. TikTok. It didn't even try to compete. It just stole time. Hours and hours of doom scrolling that used to be Netflix binges and piracy. It was back, because when you need 5 subscriptions to watch everything, people stop paying. They find another way to. Netflix was surrounded for the first time in its life. Netflix wasn't the disruptor, it was the disrupted. The company that killed Blockbuster, humbled Hollywood, and rewrote the rules, was now just another player in a crowded, chaotic market. And it was losing, not dying, but bleeding, slowly, quietly, painfully. Because the throne Netflix built, it wasn't unshakable. It was always temporary, and now everyone knew it. Netflix had a secret weapon. The algorithm was magic. It knew what you wanted before you did. It recommended shows you didn't know existed and made you fall in love. It was the invisible hand that guided your binge and kept you hooked for years. The algorithm was Netflix's competitive edge. But then something changed. The algorithm stopped serving you. It started serving Netflix. Instead of finding what you loved, it pushed what Netflix needed you to watch. Shows they spent millions on. Projects that were tanking. Content that needed views to justify the budget. You started noticing it, didn't you? You'd scroll, and scroll, and scroll. Hundreds of thumbnails. Nothing grabbed you. Everything looked the same. Generic posters. Forgettable titles. You picked something out of exhaustion, not excitement, and halfway through, you quit. Because Netflix wasn't making shows anymore. It was making content. Data-driven, algorithm-approved, focus-grouped content designed to check boxes, not move hearts. Squid Game worked because it was bold, weird, and risky. It wasn't made by the algorithm. It broke the algorithm. But after Squid Game, Netflix tried to replicate it. More survival games, more foreign thrillers, more Squid Game-like projects, and none of them hit. Because audiences don't want copies. They want originals. They want risk. They want soul. But the algorithm doesn't understand soul. It understands patterns, metrics, click-through rates. And so Netflix became a factory, churning out content, canceling shows after one season, greenlighting sequels nobody asked for. The creative spark that made Netflix dangerous. Gone. The trust audiences had in the Netflix brand. Broken. You used to open Netflix and know you'd find something great. Now, you open it and feel nothing. That's the tragedy. Netflix's greatest weapon became its greatest weakness. The algorithm that built the empire was now burying it. So, where does that leave Netflix? Still standing, still streaming, still spending billions. But the throne is in ashes. Netflix is no longer the king of streaming. It's a survivor, a corporate giant clinging to relevance in a war it started but can't finish. The $12 billion mistake wasn't just financial. It was philosophical. Netflix forgot what made it powerful in the first place. It wasn't the library. It wasn't the algorithm. It wasn't even the content. It was daring. It was simplicity. It was the feeling that Netflix understood you and trusted you to choose. But in chasing growth, Netflix lost itself. It became what it once destroyed: bloated, desperate, and predictable. The irony is almost poetic. Netflix killed Blockbuster for being too slow, too arrogant, too stuck in the past. And now, Netflix is making the same mistakes, raising prices, cracking down on users, prioritizing profit over experience. The rebel became the empire. And empires always fall. But here's the haunting part. Netflix isn't dead. It's just diminished. It's still making great shows sometimes. It's still innovating occasionally. It's still growing barely. But the magic, the cultural dominance, the feeling that Netflix was the future, that's gone. And it's never coming back. Because the age of Netflix, the age when one platform ruled them all, is over. The streaming wars fragmented everything. And in the chaos, Netflix became just another option. Not the best, not the boldest, just another. So here's the question we're left with. Can Netflix ever reclaim the throne? Or was it always destined to be temporary, a brilliant, reckless, unforgettable empire that burned too bright, too fast? What do you think? Was Netflix's fall inevitable? Or could they have avoided it? The crown is broken. The king has fallen. And the throne? The throne waits for whoever dares to take it next.